Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to The Walk. Today is Tuesday, May 9th, and through a lot of prayer and a lot of study, I have figured out what these three snakes mean, and I'm going to tell you all about that. But first, I want to go through Lamentations chapter 2. Now, if you have any question as to whether or not God orchestrated the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of Jerusalem, all you have to read is chapter 2, because it's clear that God did have his hands in it. God is using that situation to discipline his people, to make his people aware of their sin, and he had to go to extreme levels to make that happen. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that God can do exactly the same thing to the United States and point out our sin in such a tangible way. So when we turn to Lamentations chapter 2, it says, "How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger." So it's not so much that God has forgotten. Remember, God knows all things. But God has turned his back on the people that he designated as his people because the sin is so ugly and he can't be near that sin. The Lord has swallowed up without mercy all the habitations of Jacob. In his wrath, he has broken down the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He has brought down to the ground in dishonor the kingdom and its rulers. And this continues to go on and on about how God has torn down Jerusalem and how God has brought them to a place where they're in utter destruction. And I wanted to point out some of the verses after verse 14. Verse 14 starts to talk about how this happened and how that spirit of religion came into play. "Your prophets have seen for you false and deceptive visions. They have not exposed your iniquity to restore your fortunes, but have seen for you oracles that are false and misleading." It's false teaching, it's misleading teaching, it's puffy, it's beautiful, it's sweet, it's cozy, it's everything the people wanted to hear. And those were the prophets that they were listening to. They were not listening to the prophets that were being directly given God's word. They were ignoring that because those prophets were telling them to turn from their sinful ways. And then verse 16, "All your enemies rail against you. They hiss, they gnash their teeth, they cry, 'We have swallowed her. Ah, this is the day we long for. Now we have it. We see it." So God has allowed those enemies to overtake this holy, holy city. And then verse 18, "Their heart cried to the Lord, O wall of the daughter of Zion. Let tears stream down like a torrent day and night. Give yourself no rest, your eyes no respite. Arise, cry out in the night, at the beginning of the night watches. Pour out your heart like water before the presence of the Lord. Lift your hands to him for the lives of your children who faint for hunger at the head of every street." So this is saying it's time to cry out to the Lord. It's time to get back to a place where you're depending and relying on him because he's the source of true strength. Verse 20, "Look, O Lord, and see, with whom have you dealt thus? Should women eat the fruit of their womb, the children of their tender care? Should priest and prophet be killed in the sanctuary of the Lord? In the dust of the streets lie the young and the old. My young women and my young men have fallen by the sword. You have killed them in the day of your anger, slaughtering without pity. You summoned as if to a festival day, my terrors on every side. And the day of the anger of the Lord, no one escaped or survived. Those whom I held and raised, my enemy destroyed." So God has completely wiped them out and completely brought them to utter destruction, just so that they will be aware of their sin and turn back to him. God's wrath is a very destructive thing. It is a very scary thing. You do not want to be in the place of God's wrath. Yes, he's a loving God. Yes, he's a faithful God, which we're going to see tomorrow. But he is also a God who gets to the point where he says, enough is enough. I'm done with this. I'm cleaning house now. So what do these three snakes mean? Well, they're all coming from that spirit of religion which manipulates. This is a spirit of manipulation. And the two that have already been born are fear and hatred. Fear of Christians and hatred against Christians. And that third one that's about to be birthed is some kind, I'm not really sure of the specifics yet, some kind of a legal action that will require Christians to follow Christ in a specific way. And if they give in and follow Christ in that specific way, they will be following the spirit of religion rather than Christ. They will literally be turning their back on Christ. So this is a time for us to stand up and say, you know what? We're the salt of the earth. We're the ones that keep the earth pure. And we need to turn back to Christ. We need to get more and more vocal about turning back to Christ as a nation so that we can avoid what happened to Jerusalem in Lamentations. We're so closely paralleled to where Jerusalem was before this destruction that we need to be, this is time for us to wake up. This is our wake-up call. We can't sit back and just quietly watch it happen. Yeah, prayer is effective. Yeah, prayer is mighty, but we also need to be talking about it in the streets, talking about it with our friends, talking about it with our family, and talking about it wherever our voice could possibly be heard, so that we don't just sit quietly and become complacent and allow this legal action to happen. As you go into your prayer closet today, pray for our nation. Pray for our nation in a mighty way. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.